Shocking truth. The shocking truth about a husband's deadly lie. Today, we dive into a chilling story that started in a small town involving two men whose seemingly ordinary lives hid a dark and tragic secret. This story unravels a friendship turned into something much more complicated, leading to a shocking crime. Stay with us as we uncover the hidden truths, the tense investigation, and the dramatic legal twist that followed. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on more gripping real-life events. On a peaceful spring afternoon in the quiet town of Bolero, Ohio, May 7th, 2017, a simple errand turned into an unimaginable nightmare. David Kinney, his wife Sherry, and their young daughter set out for a visit to Brad McGarry's home to return a weed trimmer. Brad wasn't just any friend, he was a cherished figure in their lives, affectionately known as Uncle Brad to David and Sherry's children. What started as an ordinary visit to a trusted family friend soon took a chilling turn. As the family arrived at Brad's home, a sense of unease began to settle over them. Brad's car sat parked in the driveway, a sign that he was likely home, but their repeated knocks on the door went unanswered. Growing increasingly concerned, they decided to check around the property. When they reached the back of the house, they noticed the service door slightly ajar, an unusual sight that only deepened their anxiety. Stepping inside, they were met with a heavy, unnerving silence. The house was uncharacteristically messy, as though something had gone terribly wrong. David, determined to get to the bottom of things, ventured further into the home. The basement held answers, but not the kind anyone could have prepared for. There, lying lifeless in a pool of blood, was Brad. The sight was harrowing, and it was immediately clear that this was no accident. The tragedy shattered the quiet afternoon, leaving David and his family in a state of shock and despair. David Kinney was not just a husband and father. He was a man defined by his loyalty and determination. When he met Sherry, a single mother raising 3 children, he was just 21 years old. Despite their age difference and the challenges that came with dating someone with such significant responsibilities, David fell deeply in love. He often described Sherry as the love of his life, and he embraced her family as if it were his own. While many questioned whether David, so young and untested, was ready to take on such a role, he was undeterred by the doubts of others. David's love for Sherry and her children drove him to make significant sacrifices. He chose to work as a coal miner, a job known for its dangers and physical toll, but one that offered stability and a steady income. It was a choice born out of necessity and devotion, reflecting his commitment to creating a secure future for his family. His resolve in the face of hardship was unwavering, a testament to the kind of man he was, strong, selfless, and determined. In contrast, Brad McGarry's life story painted a picture of resilience in the face of adversity. Growing up as a gay man in the conservative town of Cambridge, Ohio, Brad endured prejudice and challenges that shaped his character. Yet, despite the obstacles, he carved out a life filled with friendships and connections that brought him joy and meaning. Brad's warm personality and unwavering authenticity left a lasting impact on those who knew him, making the loss of his life all the more devastating. Brad McGarry was a man who embraced his true self, regardless of the societal expectations and prejudices he faced. Living openly as a gay man in a conservative small town was not easy, but Brad never allowed others' opinions to dictate how he lived his life. At first, he pursued a career in hairstyling, a field that suited his creative nature and vibrant personality. However, the small town environment posed challenges, and financial stability in this profession proved elusive. Determined to create a better future for himself, Brad made a bold and unexpected choice to switch careers entirely. He decided to become a coal miner, a profession that stood in stark contrast to his previous work. This career change was not only a practical decision to ensure financial security, but also a step into an unfamiliar and rugged world. It was in this challenging environment that Brad met David Kinney, another young man striving to support his family through hard work and resilience. Their shared experiences and similar backgrounds laid the foundation for a quick and meaningful friendship. David and Brad's bond grew rapidly, fueled by a mutual respect and a sense of camaraderie that extended beyond the coal mines. Brad was warmly welcomed into David's family, where he became a beloved figure, especially to David's children, who affectionately called him Uncle Brad. To the outside world, their friendship appeared genuine and unbreakable. a connection forged through shared jokes, heartfelt conversations, and unwavering support. However, beneath this close friendship lay a deeper and more complicated relationship that they carefully kept hidden. Over time, their connection evolved from platonic camaraderie into a secret romantic affair. For Brad, this relationship was a source of affection and intimacy in a life often marked by challenges. For David, it was an escape from the pressures of his public life, one that he kept tightly under wraps due to the potential consequences of discovery. The affair was meticulously concealed, with both men fully aware of the risks involved. David, as a married man and stepfather, had much at stake. His life revolved around maintaining the image of a devoted husband and family man, and any revelation of his relationship with Brad could shatter his marriage, disrupt his role in his children's lives, and ruin his reputation in their conservative community. For Brad, the secrecy was a painful but necessary burden, one he bore to protect the fragile balance of their lives. As their secret relationship deepened, the pressure of living a double life began to take its toll. The bond they had formed, once a source of joy and support, became a complex web of hidden emotions, fears, and unspoken truths. This clandestine affair, while deeply personal, was destined to collide with the realities of their lives in ways neither could foresee, setting the stage for devastating consequences that would impact not only them, but everyone around them. Being in a secret relationship with a married man brought a unique set of challenges for Brad McGarry. As someone who had faced prejudice and judgment for living openly as a gay man, Brad may have found comfort and companionship in his connection with David. However, the clandestine nature of their relationship likely weighed heavily on him. Hiding their bond from the world, especially under the guise of a close friendship, created an emotional strain. The secrecy, coupled with the complexities of loyalty and unspoken desires, set the stage for a series of events that would take a devastating turn. The day of May 7th, 2017 began like any other. That afternoon, Brad attended a family lunch where he seemed to be in high spirits. His relaxed demeanor gave no indication of the tragedy looming ahead. As the lunch came to an end, Brad mentioned he had an appointment later that day and needed to head home. His family didn't question this. Brad often had plans and was known for his social nature. He left between 1:30 and 2:20 p.m., completely unaware that it would be the last time he would see his loved ones. Later that day, David Kinney, along with his wife Sherry and their young daughter, decided to visit Brad's home. Their purpose was simple: to return a weed trimmer. It was intended to be a quick and casual visit to a close family friend. However, when they arrived, something felt out of place. Brad's car was parked in the driveway, a sign that he should have been home, but repeated knocks at the front door went unanswered. The eerie silence began to stir a sense of unease among them. Growing more concerned, the family decided to look around the property. When they reached the back of the house, they noticed the service door was slightly open, an unusual and alarming detail. Hesitantly, they stepped inside, only to find the house in complete disarray. Drawers were pulled open, belongings were scattered across the floor, and the chaotic scene was unsettling. It was clear that something terrible had happened, and a rising panic gripped them as they called out for Brad, hoping he might answer. Sherry began searching the upstairs rooms, calling Brad's name as she went, while David decided to check the basement. What awaited him there would be a sight he would never forget. As he descended the stairs, his eyes met a horrifying scene. Brad's lifeless body lying murder. That was the only word that could describe the horrifying scene at Brad McGarry's home. In a state of panic, Sherry dialed 911, setting off a police investigation that would unearth shocking truths. When officers arrived, they were met with chaos. The home showed clear signs of a disturbance: furniture overturned, drawers yanked open, and personal belongings scattered everywhere. The disorder painted a grim picture, but it was what they found in the basement that confirmed the worst. Brad's lifeless body lay face down in a pool of blood, a gunshot wound to the back of his head revealing the cold, brutal nature of his death. From the start, the police treated Brad's death as a homicide. David and Sherry, visibly shaken, explained their connection to Brad. They described him as more than a friend. He was family. Brad had been a cherished part of their lives for years, even earning the affectionate title of Uncle Brad from their children. The couple recounted their intention that afternoon to simply return a weed trimmer, never expecting to stumble upon such a horrifying discovery. Their anguish and disbelief were palpable, but their account also raised questions about who might have wanted to harm Brad and why. As detectives began digging into Brad's personal life, new details emerged. David and Sherry revealed that Brad, who was openly gay, had recently ended a turbulent relationship with a man named Scotty. Though they didn't know Scotty's last name, they described the relationship as volatile, marked by frequent arguments and emotional upheaval. According to them, this toxic connection had taken a toll on Brad, making it a potential lead in the case. At first, investigators briefly considered the possibility of suicide. The disarray in the house suggested a struggle, and they wondered if Brad had acted out of desperation. However, this theory was quickly discarded when forensic experts noted the absence of a weapon near Brad's body. In cases of suicide, the weapon is almost always found in close proximity to the victim. The lack of a firearm strongly indicated that Brad's death was not self-inflicted. Instead, it pointed to a far more sinister scenario. Someone had staged the scene to mislead investigators. This revelation shifted the focus of the investigation. Detectives began examining Brad's relationships more closely, including his connections to David. Though Brad's house appeared to be in complete disarray, something didn't add up. Valuable items such as his television, a noticeable amount of cash on the floor, and his collection of rustic art were untouched. For investigators, this was a significant clue. If this had been a robbery, why would the perpetrator leave behind such easily stolen items? The evidence strongly suggested that the chaotic state of the house had been staged, an attempt to throw investigators off the trail and make the crime appear to be a botched burglary. This realization pushed detectives to explore deeper motives behind Brad's murder. One of the initial theories considered by investigators was that Brad, an openly gay man in a small conservative town, might have been the victim of a hate crime. His sexual orientation could have made him a target for someone harboring prejudice, especially given the traditional values often associated with such communities. This possibility was further fueled by Brad's career as a coal miner, a field known for being dominated by conservative individuals. Investigators wondered if someone in his workplace might have had an issue with his identity, leading to a fatal confrontation. However, this theory began to lose credibility as detectives interviewed Brad's co-workers. Contrary to what might have been expected, his colleagues described him as a friendly and well-liked individual. He had no known conflicts or enemies at work, and there was no indication that anyone in his professional life bore him ill will. With the hate crime theory dismissed and the robbery angle appearing increasingly implausible, investigators were left to grapple with the possibility that Brad's death was far more personal and complex than it initially seemed. The staged nature of the crime scene pointed to someone who wanted to disguise their true motive. This led detectives to focus their attention on Brad's personal relationships, hoping to uncover clues about who might have wanted him dead. They began speaking with Brad's family and close friends, piecing together details about his private life and interactions with others. As they dug deeper, secrets began to surface. Secrets that painted a much clearer picture of the circumstances surrounding his murder. One lead that stood out was Brad's recent breakup with a man named Scotty. Friends described the relationship as stormy and filled with frequent arguments. It had been a toxic connection that had brought Brad considerable stress, and he had chosen to end things shortly before his death. The timing of the breakup raised red flags for investigators who initially considered Scotty a prime suspect. Could he have lashed out in anger over their separation? However, this promising lead quickly unraveled when detectives discovered an undeniable alibi for Scotty. He had been in jail for the past 3 months, serving time for a probation violation. This revelation eliminated him as a possible perpetrator, leaving investigators once again searching for answers. With Scotty ruled out, they were forced to re-examine other aspects of Brad's life and the people closest to him, knowing that the truth behind his violent death was still out there, waiting to be uncovered. Although Scotty had been ruled out as the murderer due to his incarceration, detectives briefly entertained the possibility that he could have orchestrated the crime from behind bars. However, no evidence emerged to support this theory, leaving investigators with no clear suspects. The breakthrough in the case came during an interview with one of Brad's cousins, who had attended the family gathering on the day of the murder. The cousin's account provided new and crucial information that would alter the course of the investigation. According to the cousin, Brad had left the family gathering sometime between 1:30 and 2 p.m. that afternoon, mentioning that he was expecting a visitor. Brad referred to this visitor as DJ and even joked that he intended to take a nap with him, hinting at an intimate relationship. The detective's curiosity was piqued as the cousin described Brad's secretive relationship with DJ, a married man who had not disclosed his true identity or sexuality to his wife. Brad had confided in the cousin about the affair, expressing a mix of excitement and frustration over the complexities of being involved with someone living a double life. After some hesitation, the cousin reluctantly revealed DJ's real identity, David Kinney. This shocking revelation upended the investigation. David, the man who had discovered Brad's body and portrayed himself as a grieving friend, was now implicated in a hidden romantic relationship with the victim. Detectives were stunned. Up until this point, David had been considered a key witness, someone who had appeared devastated by the loss of a man he claimed was like family. Now, his secret connection to Brad cast him in a far different light, raising significant questions about his potential involvement in the crime. The revelation of David's affair with Brad immediately made him the prime suspect. Investigators had to confront the possibility that their seemingly innocent witness might have had a powerful motive to silence Brad. As detectives dug deeper, the pieces began to fall into place. Could David's fear of his secret being exposed, along with the risk of losing his family, reputation, and livelihood, have driven him to commit murder? The idea seemed increasingly plausible as more details emerged about the relationship between David and armed with critical phone data. Detectives began reconstructing a timeline that painted an increasingly damning picture of David Kinney's involvement in the murder. The evidence was further strengthened by surveillance footage obtained from a neighbor's security camera. The footage revealed David arriving at Brad's house shortly before the estimated time of the crime. Curiously, he was not driving his own truck, but his wife Sherry's vehicle, a decision investigators believed was an attempt to avoid recognition. The camera captured David entering Brad's home and staying there for roughly 40 minutes before leaving. What raised further suspicion was that later the same day, the camera recorded David returning to the property. This time, he arrived in his own truck, accompanied by Sherry and their young daughter. He claimed this second visit was to return a weed trimmer, but detectives began to suspect it was a calculated move to establish an alibi and feign innocence. The surveillance footage, combined with David's phone records, built a compelling case. It not only placed David at Brad's home during the critical time frame, but also highlighted the contradictions in his story. Initially, David had portrayed himself as stumbling upon the crime scene by chance. Now, the evidence suggested a deliberate effort to manipulate the narrative and cover his tracks. The mounting proof left little doubt in the minds of investigators. They were closing in on their prime suspect. With the walls closing in, detectives decided it was time to confront David Kinney directly. When first questioned, David vehemently denied any involvement in Brad's murder. He clung to his initial story, insisting he was an innocent friend shocked by the horrific discovery of Brad's body. However, as detectives presented the irrefutable evidence, the surveillance footage, phone records, and inconsistencies in his timeline, David's story began to unravel. Under mounting pressure, David's narrative shifted multiple times. He offered no fewer than 7 conflicting versions of the events on the day of the murder, each more dubious than the last. Finally, he admitted to having an affair with Brad, a fact he had vehemently denied earlier. However, David attempted to downplay the relationship, describing it as a brief fling rather than a long-term connection. According to him, it was an insignificant and fleeting affair that had no bearing on the events leading to Brad's death. Eventually, David confessed to being at Brad's house on the day of the murder, but claimed it was to end their romantic relationship. He alleged that during their conversation, Brad became enraged and brandished a gun, threatening him. David's account painted a picture of a heated argument escalating into a physical struggle. He claimed that in self-defense, he wrestled the gun away and shot Brad. Despite his insistence that it was an act of survival, investigators remained skeptical. The inconsistencies in his account and the deliberate steps to conceal his actions suggested a far more calculated motive than he was willing to admit. David Kinney insisted that Brad McGarry's death was an unplanned act of desperation, claiming he acted out of panic and fear. However, the forensic evidence painted a starkly different picture, unraveling David's narrative. The autopsy revealed Brad had been shot twice in the back of the head, a chilling detail that pointed to an execution-style killing rather than the chaotic self-defense scenario David had described. The trajectory of the bullets confirmed Brad was shot from behind, suggesting he was caught off guard and never given a chance to defend himself. David's assertion of a face-to-face struggle during which he wrestled the gun away was directly contradicted by the physical evidence. The positioning of the gunshot wounds and the lack of defensive injuries on Brad told a story of calculated violence. These forensic findings dismantled David's claim of self-defense, leaving little doubt that Brad's death was not the result of a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a deliberate act of murder. Further complicating David's case was his inability to provide a credible explanation for the murder weapon. Despite being pressed by detectives, he admitted to disposing of the gun, but gave conflicting accounts of where and how he got rid of it. His evasiveness regarding the weapon's whereabouts suggested an intentional effort to destroy crucial evidence. Investigators saw this as a clear attempt to cover his tracks, adding to their growing belief that the murder had been premeditated. The staged crime scene provided further proof of David's deceit. Detectives noted that the ransacked appearance of the house, with drawers pulled open and furniture displaced, seemed artificial. High-value items such as Brad's television and other valuables were left untouched, casting doubt on the idea of a robbery gone wrong. Instead, the evidence pointed to a calculated effort to mislead investigators and divert suspicion away from the true motive for the killing. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, a chilling narrative began to emerge. The combination of forensic evidence, David's inconsistent statements, and his attempts to hide the weapon revealed a man determined to eliminate Brad and erase any trace of his involvement. Detectives now believe that David had carefully planned the murder, driven by motives that went far deeper than a simple argument or moment of panic. With the weight of the evidence stacked against him, David's credibility crumbled. The autopsy findings, the staged crime scene, and the missing weapon all pointed to one conclusion: Brad's murder was a premeditated act. The investigation had reached a critical point, and detectives were confident they had enough to pursue a case for first-degree murder. The story of betrayal, secrecy, and cold-blooded violence was beginning to take shape, leaving no room for David's claims of innocence to stand. With mounting evidence pointing to his guilt, David Kinney was formally charged with first-degree murder. In a preliminary court hearing in May 2017, the prosecution laid out the case against him, presenting the damning forensic evidence, surveillance footage, and phone data that placed David at Brad McGarry's home at the time of the murder. They highlighted the inconsistencies in David's stories and the deliberate actions he took to stage the crime scene, portraying him as a calculated individual who went to great lengths to cover up his actions. The gravity of the charges led the judge to set bail at $1 million, a reflection of the seriousness of the crime. David's defense team quickly requested a reduction in bail, arguing that the amount was excessive and beyond his financial means. They painted a picture of David as a devoted family man who found himself in a complex and emotionally charged situation. They suggested that if a crime had occurred, it was manslaughter rather than premeditated murder, downplaying the evidence of intent. However, the judge was not swayed, emphasizing the deliberate nature. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the case against David was built on a foundation of solid evidence and unshakable facts. The prosecution's portrayal of him as a man driven by fear of exposure and desperate to protect his double life resonated with the jury. The chilling details of Brad's murder, combined with David's evasive behavior and shifting stories, painted a damning portrait of guilt. The trial would ultimately determine whether justice for Brad McGarry would be served, leaving the courtroom gripped by the weight of the unfolding drama. Throughout the trial, various family members were called to testify, offering insight into both Brad and David's character. They described their relationships with each other and painted a picture of the kind of people they were. Their testimony helped the court understand the complexity of the situation and the emotional stakes involved. Some family members expressed their shock and disbelief, struggling to reconcile the loving father and husband they knew with the man now facing charges for a brutal murder. During the proceedings, new evidence was introduced that added another layer of intrigue to the case. A used condom found at the crime scene contained Brad's DNA on the outside, while the inside held the DNA of an unknown male. Notably, there was no trace of David's DNA on the condom. This discovery raised questions about Brad's relationships and whether anyone else might have been involved. However, the prosecution quickly dismissed the idea that this evidence had any direct relevance to the murder. They argued that the DNA findings did not change the fact that David was responsible, given the overwhelming physical evidence and the inconsistencies in his testimony. As the trial came to a close, the jury carefully considered all the evidence presented, including the testimonies, forensic findings, and David's conflicting accounts of the events. They deliberated for several hours, weighing the motives behind the crime, David's behavior, and the physical proof that pointed to his involvement. It was clear that David had been deceitful and manipulative, and the jury took this into account when making their final decision. In the end, the verdict was unanimous. David Kinney was guilty of aggravated murder. The moment the jury announced their decision, the courtroom erupted with emotion. Some family members of Brad, overwhelmed by grief, began to cry, while others held their breath, waiting for the weight of the verdict to sink in. The conviction confirmed what many had feared and suspected all along, that David had been responsible for taking Brad's life. For Brad's loved ones, it was a bittersweet victory, as justice had been served, but nothing could bring Brad back. David was now left to face the consequences of his actions, while Brad's family and friends were left to cope with the pain of his loss. After David's conviction, the court moved to the sentencing phase, which would determine the length of his punishment. The judge had 4 possible sentencing options to choose from, all involving life imprisonment, but with varying chances for parole after 20, 25, or 30 years. The seriousness of the crime, especially its calculated nature, weighed heavily in the judge's final decision. After careful consideration, the judge sentenced David to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In addition, he was sentenced to an extra 3 years for the use of a firearm during the murder. This sentence reflected the severity of the crime and the fact that Brad had been executed in cold blood. During the sentencing, the judge took time to reflect on the consequences of David's actions and the far-reaching impact of his secret life. He spoke about the destructive nature of lies and deception, and how David's need to hide his affair with Brad led to a series of tragic events. The fear of living truthfully and the desire to maintain a double life ultimately cost Brad his life and destroyed the trust within 2 families. The judge highlighted the deep sense of loss felt by all those involved, emphasizing how secrecy and betrayal led to irreversible damage that no legal outcome could undo. As of mid-2023, David Kinney is still serving his life sentence in an Ohio prison with no possibility of release. His conviction and imprisonment marked the end of a tragic chapter, but the impact of his crime continues to resonate. The case remains a powerful example of how concealed lives and buried truths can lead to tragic consequences. The murder of Brad McGarry shocked not only his family but also the entire community, leaving behind a legacy of grief and loss. A friendship that once seemed unbreakable was ultimately torn apart by deception, betrayal, and a violent act that no one could have predicted. The story of David Kinney and Brad McGarry serves as a painful reminder of the damage that secrecy and dishonesty can cause. What began as a deep friendship between the 2 men slowly evolved into a secret affair, and this hidden relationship eventually spiraled into a violent crime that claimed Brad's life. The aftermath of this murder was felt far beyond the families directly involved, extending into the small town that once knew both men and the many people who had considered them friends. The ripple effect of the crime shattered not just one family, but a whole community, forever changing their lives. This case highlights the dangers of suppressed emotions and the destructive power of keeping secrets. What may have started as a simple desire for closeness or companionship quickly spiraled out of control, leading to a devastating loss of life. It serves as a stark reminder of how important it is to live honestly, embrace the truth, and accept ourselves and others. As we look back on the events surrounding Brad McGarry's death, we are reminded of how fragile human relationships are and how vital it is to avoid letting secrets, lies, and deceit tear them apart. This case serves as a stark reminder of how secrecy, lies, and hidden desires can tear lives apart in ways we never expect. What seemed like an unbreakable friendship ended in betrayal, violence, and a life lost too soon. It shows the importance of honesty, acceptance, and the dangers of keeping dark secrets locked away. Thank you for following along with us today. If you found this story thought-provoking, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on more unsettling tales from real life. Your support means a lot and helps us bring you more stories. Stay aware, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.